So, I haven't looked into this kind of stuff in a while, but there's been some weird happenings around the world lately. For example, the potential that the human species may have been around a lot longer than we initially thought, based on these monolithic structures that we previously suspected to be about 4,000 years old, are now suspected to be a lot older. Ancient civilizations talking about groups of men that came to their countries and brought civilization, astronomy, and agriculture, and lately all these world mysteries have been occupying a lot of my time. So there I was over at a friend's house, just hanging out, having myself a good day, when my friend looks over at me and says, "I gotta show you this video, dude, you're not gonna believe this." Now maybe you've seen this video before, and if you have, you probably know what this video is gonna be about. Normally I don't touch these kinds of strange videos, but I haven't seen a lot of people talking about this, and those that do take the situation a bit too far. So I wanted to watch through this with you guys today and see what the hell might be going on with this ceremony. Now first things first, let's talk about what this actually is. In 2016 Switzerland, the world's largest and deepest tunnel was built, spanning 35.4 miles and 1.4 miles deep. There was a lot of hype around this tunnel, being as it passes through the Swiss Alps and makes the journey from Switzerland, Germany, Italy, and France a lot quicker. The strange part about this tunnel was the opening ceremony, which didn't take too long as I was watching it to realize that this was a bit weird. Now, I'm not going to go through the entire ceremonies, that would take over an hour, but I have a few bullet points and spots in the videos that I'd like to discuss, and if you're curious, I'll leave the links to the full thing in the description and you can make your own judgments on this. So first things first, this ceremony was put on in Switzerland for the opening of the tunnel. World leaders from all over Europe, mostly leaders from Germany, France, and Italy were invited, which makes sense being as that's who this tunnel would affect most, but it also seemed to spook a lot of people and I can kinda understand why once it gets going. One thing to note, before the ceremony began, the tunnel was blessed by a priest, and then right after that, this satanic display arose. So the first thing we have here is a large group of people walking into the center of the tunnel almost like they're dazed or under the control of the music. The way they walk has been likened to a zombified state by pretty much anyone who did touch on this video. Now, the first part of this isn't so bad. Just a choreographed dance put on by people dressed up as construction workers. Sure, the music's a bit dark, but overall nothing too weird yet. At about 5 minutes in, the construction workers become a bit manic, like they don't know what they're doing. And then right after that, this last train car brings in a group of people who are dressed in more revealing clothing, and accompanying them is what most have identified as a fallen angel, which is apparently an angel that disobeyed God and became corrupt. I know this seems like a bit of a stretch, but once the ceremony really gets going, there's absolutely no confusion here on this. There's even a scene in here that may even be an imagining of the fallen angel corrupting people. After this, another card is rolled in with what people refer to as demonic creatures, and then with them is a goat man, who typically represents Satan in ancient scribbles. As I was watching through this with my friend, the thoughts in my head were, all of this for a tunnel? But don't worry, it gets a lot stranger than this. At around 14 minutes, we see this goat is being worshipped, and people are bringing him offerings of trees, which I guess are upside down trees? Now I never knew this, but apparently this symbolizes an upside down cross, or the tree of death, which really does fit the theme here. When I was watching this part and thinking about it artistically, I imagined that maybe this was supposed to be some depiction of hell or a dark world or something like that. Right after that though, this man gets on a stage and sings in gibberish, and he even speaks in gibberish. It's kind of like he's calling for Satan, and Satan does respond. Right after that, the man who is singing sits down and watches everyone around him start celebrating, possibly celebrating the arrival of Satan? There are a few who speculate that the red lights in here are supposed to represent a blood sacrifice, but that's not really clear to me, at least until they take the severed head of a woman and lift it above the dancers. The silk that falls from her head seems to represent that she was decapitated, as though it's blood. The severed head is then put on a body of a woman, and the first train makes its way through the tunnel. Now, if that was it, fine. It's freaking strange, but the next half of this display actually takes place outside. This is the part that was kind of odd to me. I mean, fine, you made art, cool, but to sit everyone down inside the tunnel, and then put on half of the performance, and then to have everyone move outside to complete it? I mean, that's just a lot of effort over a tunnel opening ceremony, right? I mean, most of these things are as simple as cutting a ribbon, crowd cheers, and now the tunnel's open and everyone can go on about their day, but whatever, let's move on to the second part. Okay, so here we are in part 2. Everyone's gone outside, and we start off again with a large group of construction workers walking in a daze, as though again they're being controlled by the music. They make their way up to this platform where a giant screen sits, and once they get up there, the workers start climbing up the wall and removing rock to form this tunnel. Now, there were a few videos I saw where they were speculating that this was the rock of Christ, but I didn't really catch the evidence for that. I'm just not sure the symbolism was there to make a claim like that. Honestly, it's part 2 that gets really weird. Instead of opening a tunnel, they seem to open up a portal, and they perform this ritualistic dance in order to open it up. One thing a few people noted was as the tunnel opened up, the workers started removing their clothes, which could symbolize a corruption of their minds. Like right and wrong doesn't exist the more they open this portal, which does seem to happen. As the tunnel opens, eventually people dress similarly to how they did when they were in the hellish realm from part 1. Eventually the music takes over again, and the people seem hypnotized and controlled, but after this is where things get really interesting. It looks like some sort of voluntary human sacrifice happens. These 3 men climb up into the tunnel and hang themselves until they're dead, and then there's this animation on the screen of the 3 workers being hurled down the tunnel as these giant demonic hands grab at them. Did I mention too that the music is really setting the tone for all this as well? It just kind of blew me away how organized all this was. It's at this point that the 3 men who sacrifice themselves turn into 3 spirits and float above the scene with an all-seeing eye, and a group of followers underneath who grab their long horns and start playing. And right after this, Satan returns. And at this point, it kind of makes sense why the first half of this performance was inside. It could have been a metaphor for Satan leaving his world and entering ours, which... what the hell? This whole show is just straight up weird. This isn't some sideshow, this was the opening ceremony for a train tunnel. And right after Satan comes, you have these demonic creatures again, and those 3 men who turned into 3 ghosts now seem to have reincarnated into 3 scarabs. Maybe they were all never the same thing, but the number 3 shows up a lot in this video. The goat man, who we suspect is Satan, then proceeds to have sex with a fallen angel or a woman of some sort, and then for a while it's nothing but chaos. Now, this we saw before with the man in the tunnel singing for Satan. Now we have a woman singing for Satan, and his new followers are bringing upside down trees as offerings again. I honestly don't know what to make of this next part. Perhaps it symbolizes materialism or the arrival of a new world Satan made. Perhaps it's demonstrating a distancing from living harmoniously with nature. It's kind of really up to your own interpretation, honestly. What seems to be Satan's bride enters the stage with a pregnant belly and another young goat-headed man, and this kind of becomes a mess of chaotic representation of a modern world. They even put political heads in suits and walk them down the aisle that Satan was on. And at the end, we have a happy little melody. People are singing and rejoicing over the new tunnel. One thing that caught my eye was time spinning out of control. This whole ceremony reminds me of what I read from Roman celebrations or depictions of ancient civilizations that predicted the future to be an evil, materialistically driven, chaotic one, where people will lose touch with themselves so much that they can no longer think for themselves and are led by evil without even realizing it had taken them. Then, just like nothing happened, at the very end, everyone's happy and celebrates the tunnel and goes home. Now, I want to take a couple minutes to give my take on this. I've watched a few videos from others across the internet, and people seem to take it way too far no matter what side they were on. For example, apparently if you're familiar with CERN, then this makes sense. CERN is located in Switzerland, and they work with what some have named evil particles that could rip a hole in our dimension and let demons in, or completely collapse our universe entirely. And that's more than fine to think about, but firstly, is there any science at all that these demons can pass through particles or even large hadron colliders? And even if demons existed and they could pass through, what's the evidence that they could corrupt a human mind beyond biblical text? Also, the ceremony didn't seem to have anything to do with CERN at all. At least, there wasn't anything I saw that represented CERN. Not that it seemed to represent a train tunnel either, but I want to move away from the radical ideas, which is kind of why I'm covering them first. Another idea that was very popular around the internet had to do with, of course, religion. That this ceremony was in fact a call to Satan, and the train tunnel was just a way to perform this ceremony without too many questions. Some of the evidence brought up for this went like this. There are 600 people who performed in the ceremony. This ceremony also took place in 2016, and it took place in June, which is the 6th month. So people were drawing Half-Life 3 connections because they caught 3 6s together. There were a few people out there who believed the ceremony was real, that Satan had really taken the minds of people and turned them against God, or somehow has taken control of all those in power and is leading them to the destruction of the earth, tearing up the Alps in defiance of God's creation. I mean, in the end here, they do have Satan giving birth to corrupt government officials. Honestly, if this ceremony was intended to be taken seriously, to really call Satan out of the abyss, I'd be far less intrigued by it. I mean, really? You honestly think that a display like this is going to do anything? That'd be like when the Mormons wrote Anne Frank's name in their book and claimed that it now made her a member of their church. Why would your superstition be any more real than a belief in Santa Claus? Good luck getting the devil here is all I'm saying. But my question is, if all these people wanted was to perform a cultic ceremony, why wouldn't they just do it? Why would they need to tell everybody? They wouldn't need to be so open about this and perform it in front of an audience for a train tunnel, and to me it feels more like a performance than a demonic cultic ceremony. Though they did do a really good job at making it seem legit. The big problem with that, though, is that not many people did see this. There's not many views on these videos, which to me is kind of weird. To have such a hype behind this tunnel, to have it be all over the news, but the ceremony didn't seem to be covered as much? That, to me, is kind of strange, which leads us into another theory that I've heard across the internet. This performance could instead be a story, which is why some people believe that this is a cult, that this is some sort of secret or hidden story about our world and why it is the way it is. Switzerland's also a very powerful country, they're very rich, which had people worried, but I feel like I have a much more grounded idea when it comes to all of this. It could be that someone had a lot of money and hired an artist that was really out there and told him that the ceremony was for the deepest tunnel, go nuts. And in his head he thought of hell and just went nuts with it. If you held a gun to my head and told me to explain this to you, I'd say that someone gave a lot of money to an artist. That artist may not have agreed with the tunnel. Perhaps he felt humans tearing through the Alps to make travel more convenient was a bit too hubristic, so he represented these political figures and builders as brainwashed spawns of Satan who transformed the peaceful, harmonized world into a mechanical, hubristic, materialistic hell. I do have an example of someone who watched this video and went a little too far with it.
This is. You don't just do this for the sake of it. There's no reason for it, especially when there's such an evil thread running throughout this. Torture, demon possession, animalistic ritualism. It goes on and on. So when you watch this, one has to ask, how far away are we from literal human sacrifice in the world we live in when we are representing that? We are mimicking that within a ritual like this. We're not far away, are we? Even human cannibalism in a ceremony like this. We've now set the foundation for these things being introduced into the modern world.
See, that's just silly. We've had worse, much worse, written in ancient text. I mean, according to my father, the Bible is the most violent book he's ever read. And even today on TV and video games, imagery far more demonic and gory than this. And it hasn't made us bloodthirsty, has it? If we can't make art because some people out there get freaked out and take it too seriously, then you just need to examine how seriously you take things and how beneficial it is for you to do that. Either way, it doesn't change the fact this is a strange ceremony, and I just wanted to share it with you guys and see what you guys thought. There are always going to be those out there who take things too seriously. People who see stuff like this and think radically, and there might even be those out there who think I'm doomed just for making a video about this. In the end, I don't know, but at least I do know that if someone tells me I'm going to hell, I can rest easy knowing that I can pick up a few souvenirs in Switzerland on the way.